The night sky was burning red. The battlefield was silent. But the silence was not peaceful. Smoke rose from broken machines, and the ground was filled with the smell of ash and iron. Ethan, a human soldier, walked slowly through the ruins, his weapon low, his legs weak. He thought he was the last one left, maybe the last human alive in this destroyed valley. Every sound made him turn. The wind pushed metal scraps against each other, making sharp echoes. He knew the war was lost, but still he kept moving, searching for water, food, or maybe hope. That was when he heard heavy footsteps behind him. He turned quickly, weapon ready, but what he saw was not another human. It was her, tall, strong, and covered in shining silver armor. The alien warrior walked out of the smoke. Her eyes glowed like blue fire, her hair tied back in braids of black and silver. Her armor was decorated with scars of old battles, and in her hand she carried a weapon bigger than Ethan's whole body. She looked like death itself, walking slowly, ready to end him with one strike. Ethan's heart raced. He knew he should run, but his legs would not move. He should raise his weapon, but his hands shook, and then, for some reason he could not understand, the words left his mouth before he could stop them. "You look hot in that armor," he said, his voice half shaky, half bold. The alien warrior stopped. Her glowing eyes widened. For a second, she looked confused, as if she had never heard those words before. Then, to Ethan's surprise, her pale face turned crimson. The great warrior blushed. Ethan blinked, not believing what he saw. She was a deadly fighter, a nightmare of war, yet she stood there with her cheeks burning red like a shy girl. But the moment of weakness did not last long. Her face hardened again, and before he could move, her armored hand swung. The slap landed on his chest. The impact was so strong that he fell to the ground. Breathless, it felt like being hit by a steel wall. The sound echoed through the ruins, shaking the air around them. Ethan coughed, trying to stand. "That hurt," he said, smiling weakly. "But worth it." The alien warrior looked down at him, her face unreadable. For a moment, it seemed like she would finish him right there. Her weapon lifted, glowing with deadly light. But then, she stopped. She stared at him as if trying to understand why he had spoken those strange words, why he had smiled even after her strike. Her people believed humans were weak, but this human's eyes carried something else, something that made her hesitate. "You are foolish," she said, her voice sharp and cold. "Maybe," Ethan answered, his voice soft but steady. "But I think you look amazing." Her hand trembled. She lowered her weapon slowly, her crimson blush returning for just a second before she forced it away. With one fast move, she grabbed Ethan by his collar and pulled him up from the ground. "You live only because I choose it," she whispered, her voice dangerous. "But one wrong word, and you die." Ethan smirked. "Then I'll try to choose my words carefully." Her grip tightened, then released. She pushed him forward, forcing him to walk. It was clear now he was her prisoner. But in Ethan's heart, a strange spark grew. Not just fear, not just survival, but curiosity. Why had she blushed? Why had she spared him? As the two walked into the smoke-filled night, the battlefield behind them fading into silence, Ethan knew this encounter was not the end. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous and far more strange, because the alien warrior's steel slap may have nearly broken him, but her crimson blush had already changed everything. The night grew darker as Ethan walked under the control of the alien warrior. Her grip on his arm was strong like iron, her weapon always close. He knew one wrong move could end him, but still, he could not forget the moment she had blushed. That single flash of weakness in a warrior made of steel. Her name was Ira, though she had not told him. He had overheard it when other warriors shouted it during the fight. Zaira, the fierce blade of her people. Known for defeating entire squads of humans alone, now she dragged one human through the ruins. Refusing to kill him, Ethan could not understand why. And that question burned in his mind. They reached a broken tower. Its walls cracked, its roof half gone. Zaira pushed him inside and stood guard near the doorway, her glowing eyes scanning the night. Ethan sat against a wall, breathing heavy. "Why didn't you kill me?" he asked, his voice calm but curious. Zaira turned her head slowly, her face shadowed by the dim light of fire outside. "You are not worth my blade," she said coldly. But Ethan caught the small pause in her voice, a hesitation she tried to hide. He laughed softly. "Not worth it. You blushed when I said you looked hot. Maybe you don't want to admit it." Her face snapped toward him, her eyes burning brighter. Without a word, she stepped forward and slapped him again. This time across the face, the sound cracked the air, sending pain through his jaw. Ethan groaned, but still grinned. "Stronger than steel. But I was right, wasn't I?" For the first time, Zaira looked unsure. Her honor code demanded silence, demanded control. Yet this human's words made her heart race in ways no battle ever had. To her people, showing emotion was weakness. To blush in front of an enemy was shame. She could not allow the others to see it, not even herself, before Ethan could speak again. Another shadow entered the ruined tower. It was another alien warrior, taller and heavier. His armor scratched but glowing with red light. He looked at Zaire, then at Ethan, and laughed. "So this is why you wandered away from battle. Zaira, you are keeping a human as your pet." Zaira stiffened, her hand tightening around her weapon. "He is my prisoner," she said firmly, her voice strong. The warrior smirked, stepping closer. "Prisoner. Or something more. I saw your face before. I saw the shame of your blush. Do you think no one noticed?" Ethan felt the air grow heavy. This was more than an insult. This was an attack on her honor. He stayed silent, knowing one wrong word could bring his death. Zaira's hand shook slightly. Then, without warning, she struck her comrade across the chest with the flat of her weapon. The impact threw him backward against the stone wall. "You will not speak of this again," she growled, her voice echoing with fury. The warrior laughed again, standing slowly. "The great Zaira protects a human with her strength. What would the council say?" Zaira's blade pressed against his throat in a flash, her eyes blazing like fire. "One more word, and you will not live to see the council," she hissed. The other warrior raised his hands, smirk fading, and finally stepped back into the shadows, but before leaving, he gave Ethan a long, mocking look. "This human is your weakness, Zaira, and weakness will destroy you," he said, disappearing into the night. Silence filled the ruined tower. Ethan looked at her, still sitting against the wall. "You defended me," he said softly. Almost in disbelief, Zaira turned away, her jaw tight. "I defended my honor," she said quickly. But her voice lacked the sharpness from before. Ethan smiled faintly. "Honor, huh? Funny. I think you're starting to like me." Her crimson blush returned before she could stop it. She cursed under her breath and turned her back to him, standing guard at the doorway again. Ethan leaned his head against the wall, tired but curious. This warrior who had slapped him harder than steel had just risked her life to protect him from her own kind. That was not honor. That was something else, something deeper, something dangerous. As the night grew colder, Ethan's eyes slowly closed. But his mind did not rest. He knew the other alien would spread rumors. He knew Zara's own people would now see her as weak. And he knew one thing for certain: whatever was happening between them was only the beginning, a bond of danger. Fire and secrets had been formed, and it would change everything. The morning came slowly, gray light falling over the broken valley. Ethan opened his eyes to see Zaira standing at the doorway. Her weapon still in her hand, her back straight as a blade. She had not slept, not even for a moment, he realized. Then that warriors like her did not allow themselves such weakness. Ethan stretched his arms, feeling the ache in his chest from her slap the night before. He winced, but smiled anyway. "Morning, Crimson Warrior," he said softly, her head turned. Fast, her eyes sharp. "Do not call me that," she warned. But Ethan noticed her cheeks heat again for only a second before she turned away. They left the ruined tower together, walking across the battlefield. The ground was covered with broken machines and bodies of both humans and aliens. Ethan tried not to look, but the sight burned in his mind. Zaira walked without emotion, her eyes cold, but he wondered if she truly felt nothing. As they moved, Ethan spoke. "So tell me, why do your people fight like this? Why destroy everything?" Zaira did not answer at first. Then she said, "War is honor. War is strength. Without it, we are nothing." Ethan shook his head. "Humans fight too, but we don't see it as everything. Sometimes we fight because we must, not because we want to." She looked at him, her eyes narrowing. "Weakness," she said. He smirked. "Or maybe wisdom." Zaire stopped, her weapon pointing at his chest. "You think your ways are better." Ethan raised his hand slightly. "Not better, just different. You think emotions are weakness, but for us, they are strength. When we care about someone, we fight harder. When we love, we protect. When we laugh, we heal." Her eyes flickered, and her grip on the weapon eased, just a little. His words struck something inside her, something she had been taught to bury. They walked again in silence, but Ethan noticed the change in her steps, slower, less sharp, as if she was thinking. As the sun rose higher, they reached the edge of the valley, where smoke thinned and mountains stood like dark giants. Suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Zaira froze. "Stay down," she ordered. Pushing Ethan to the ground, he obeyed, and within seconds, arrows of light shot from the rocks above. Exploding on impact, a group of alien warriors appeared. Their armor black, their symbols painted in red. They were not Zaira's allies. They were another clan, enemies even to her people. One shouted, "A traitor walks with a human." Their weapons lifted, ready to strike. Zaira stepped forward, her blade glowing. "This human is mine," she shouted back, her voice full of fury. The enemy laughed. "Then you will die with him." The battle was fast and violent. Zaire moved. Like lightning, her blade cutting through the air, striking armor and steel. Ethan grabbed a fallen weapon from the ground, firing clumsy shots, but enough to help. One enemy rushed him, but Ethan rolled aside and struck back. Surprising even himself, Zaire fought with deadly grace. But for every enemy she cut down, two more appeared. Ethan's heart pounded. But he stood close to her, fighting with whatever strength he had. For the first time, she saw that humans were not as weak as her people claimed. This human, though untrained compared to her, refused to run, refused to give up. At last, the enemy fell back, their bodies scattered, their leaders shouting orders as they retreated into the mountains. Zaira stood tall, her armor cracked, her breathing heavy. Ethan wiped the blood from his face. Shaking but alive, he looked at her and said with a grin, "Not bad, but I think I saved you at least twice." Her head snapped toward him, her face unreadable. Then her hand came fast, striking his shoulder with another slap. The force nearly spun him around. "That was for your arrogance," she said sharply, but her lips almost curved into something close to a smile. As the smoke cleared, Ethan saw her differently now, not only as a warrior of steel, but as someone carrying a heavy weight. Her culture demanded she hide her feelings, but in battle, he saw flashes of something more. A spark of respect, maybe even trust. That night, they made camp in the mountains. Ethan sat by the fire, warming his hands, while Zaira sharpened her blade. He said quietly, "You know, for someone who thinks emotions are weakness, you care a lot. You cared enough to fight your own kind. And to save me." Her hand paused on the blade, her eyes lifting to his. "I protect because it is my duty," she said quickly, but Ethan shook his head. "No. You protect because somewhere inside you care." For the first time, she did not argue. She only looked into the fire, silent. Her crimson blush hidden by the flickering light, Ethan leaned back, his eyes heavy with sleep. He whispered, "You can keep slapping me all you want, but I'm not going anywhere." Zara's lips pressed together, her hand tightening on her blade. She told herself it was anger, but deep inside, she knew it was something else, and that something frightened her more than any battle. The mountains were quiet at dawn, but the silence was not safe. Ethan sat near the dying fire, watching Zaira sharpen her blade. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried shadows. He had learned enough in the last days to know that her silence was not peace, but battle inside her. She had defended him, fought for him, even struck her own comrade to keep him alive. Ethan wanted to believe she cared, but he knew the danger around them was growing. Her own people would not forgive such actions, and the enemies from the black-armored clan had already seen the truth. Zaira, the strongest warrior of her people, now carried a secret that could destroy her connection to a human. They walked through narrow paths between sharp rocks. The wind whistled, carrying strange sounds. Ethan followed close, his steps heavy but steady. He tried to break the tension with a smile. "So, what happens if your people find out you've been dragging me around instead of killing me?" Zara's eyes stayed forward, her voice sharp. "They will call me traitor. And traitors do not live long." Ethan whistled softly. "That bad, huh?" She glanced at him, her face unreadable. Worse, by midday, the narrow path opened to a small camp hidden between cliffs. Alien warriors stood there, their armor shining silver, marked with Zaira's crest, her own people. Ethan froze, but Zaira gave him a hard look. "Do not speak unless I command it," she whispered. The warriors welcomed her with respect, bowing their heads. One, younger but with sharp eyes, stepped forward. "Zaira, champion of the steel flame, you live?" She nodded, her voice strong. "I live, but the war is not done." Then the young warrior's eyes shifted to Ethan, his lip curled in disgust. "And why does a human walk beside you?" Ethan opened his mouth, but Zaira cut him off with a glare. "He is my prisoner," she said quickly, her voice cold. The warrior circled Ethan like a predator. "Prisoner? He looks more like your shadow." The camp laughed, the sound heavy with mockery. Zaira's jaw tightened, her hand twitching toward her blade. Ethan saw it, the same fire in her eyes as before, the one that burned when someone questioned her honor. But before she could speak, another voice came from the crowd, deeper, stronger. A tall warrior with scarred armor stepped forward, his presence commanding silence. He was older, but his eyes were sharp like steel. "Zaira," he said, "the council whispers already. They say you spared humans. They say your blade has grown soft." The camp waited for her answer. Zaire stood tall, her voice like thunder. "My blade is not soft. It is sharper than ever. I kill where killing is needed. I fight where honor demands it." The older warrior's gaze narrowed, shifting again to Ethan. "And what honor do you find in keeping this human alive?" The air grew heavy. Ethan's heart pounded. He wanted to speak, but one word could mean death. Zaira's face betrayed nothing but inside. Her thoughts twisted like knives to admit the truth that she saw strength in Ethan, that she felt something she was forbidden to feel would destroy her. So she lied, but her voice shook. "He is bait, a tool to draw more enemies." That is why he lives, the warriors muttered among themselves, some nodding, others doubtful. The older ones studied her, then finally stepped back. We will see, he said slowly. But remember, Zeo weakness spreads like rot, and I will not allow rot in our people. That night, the camp settled, but Ethan could not rest. He whispered to Zaira when no one listened. You lied for me? Her eyes flashed, her voice sharp. I lied for myself, but Ethan smiled softly. No, you didn't. She slapped his arm hard. The strike more controlled than before, not meant to break, but to silence, still. Her cheeks burned in the firelight, her secret alive between them. As the stars stretched across the sky, Ethan realized something. It wasn't the enemies outside that were the greatest danger. It was the ones around them, the whispers, the suspicion. The eyes watching Zaira's every move. The real threat was not the battlefield, but her own people, the enemy within. And yet, even in the shadow of betrayal, Ethan could not help but feel something dangerous rising in his chest, a bond he could not name, but one that grew stronger with every slap, every glance, every risk she took for him, and deep down, he wondered if Zaira felt it too. Though her culture chained her heart behind steel and silence. The night in the mountain camp was cold. The fire burned low, and the air was filled with whispers. Ethan sat near the flames, pretending to rest, but his mind was sharp. Listening to the voices around him, the alien warriors spoke in their language. But he caught enough to know what they meant. They doubted Zaira. They questioned her loyalty. They wondered why a human still breathed beside her. Zaira sat apart from the others, her blade resting on her knees, her eyes staring into the fire. She looked like stone, hard and unshaken. But Ethan had learned that behind her steel mask, something human stirred. He had seen it in her blush, in her hesitation, in the way she struck her comrade for mocking her. Now, he wanted answers when the camp grew quiet. Ethan leaned close, his voice low. Why do you keep me alive? Tell me the truth this time. Zara's eyes did not move, but her hand tightened on the blade. You would not understand, she said coldly. Then explain it, Ethan pressed. I've seen you fight. I've seen you stand against your own people for me. That's not honor. That's something else. Her jaw clenched, her face hard. But her voice trembled just enough to betray her. My people are bound by the code of steel. She whispered. We do not laugh. We do not cry. We do not love. Emotions are weakness. Weakness is death. Ethan frowned. So that's why you slapped me? Because I made you blush. Her eyes snapped to his, fire and shame burning together. Yes, she hissed. You shamed me. Your words made me feel something I should not. Something forbidden. Ethan leaned back slowly, the truth sinking in. Her people had trained her to kill without feeling, to live without heart. But one simple compliment had cracked the armor she wore inside as much as the armor on her body. He gave her a soft smile. Where I come from. Feeling isn't weakness. It's strength. Love makes us fight harder. Care makes us braver. Emotions are what make us human. Zara turned away quickly, hiding her face. But Ethan saw it again, the faint crimson blush glowing in the firelight. She tried to control it, but her hand shook as it gripped the blade. You twist words, she muttered. You tempt me toward ruin? Or maybe, Ethan said quietly, I'm showing you another way. Before she could answer, the sound of movement came from the edge of camp. Shadows slipped between rocks, armor glinting faintly in the moonlight. Enemy scouts, the same black-armored clan they had fought before. Ethan's heart raced. We're surrounded, he whispered. Zaira rose in a flash, her blade alive with light, her voice sharp. Stay close. The enemy struck fast, arrows of fire raining down, explosions tearing the ground. Warriors from the camp shouted, rushing to meet the attack. But chaos filled the night. Zyra stood at Ethan's side, taking down any who came near her movements. Fierce and desperate, Ethan grabbed a weapon from the dirt, firing wildly. Fighting not with skill, but with will, through the clash of steel and fire. Ethan saw one enemy warrior break through the line, rushing at Zyra from behind without thinking. Ethan threw himself forward, slamming into the attacker. The blade meant for her tore across his arm instead. Blood spilling, Ethan cried out. Stumbling back, but he had saved her. Zyra turned, her eyes wide. Her blade cutting the enemy down in one strike. She dropped to Ethan's side, her hands grabbing his shoulders. Foolish human, she snapped, but her voice broke, her face pale. Why would you do that? Ethan gritted his teeth through the pain, forcing a grin. Because where I come from, that's what you do for someone you care about. Her chest tightened, her breath uneven. And before she could stop herself, her hand struck his cheek. The slap was sharp, but not like before, carried no anger. Only fear, only fire. Her eyes shimmered. Not with cold steel, but with something softer, something dangerous. You will not die. She whispered fiercely, her voice breaking like the edge of glass. I will not allow it. The battle raged around them. But for that moment, Ethan saw her clearly. The crimson blush, the trembling hands, the mask of honor cracking apart. And he realized the truth. Her greatest enemy was not the humans, not the other clans, not even war itself. Her greatest enemy was the feelings inside her, feelings she could no longer control. When the fight ended, the camp was broken. Bodies scattered, smoke rising, Zyra stood guard over Ethan, her blade dripping with blood, her eyes sharp toward anyone who dared approach. Her people saw it, they whispered. They understood Zyra had chosen, not honor, not duty, but something else. That night, when the camp fell silent again, Ethan whispered to her with a weak smile, You saved me. Again, she turned away, her crimson blush glowing even in the dark. And though she said nothing, Ethan knew the truth had been revealed. Zyra was no longer fighting only her enemies. She was fighting herself. The mountain camp lay in ruins. Broken by fire and blood, the surviving warriors gathered their wounded, their faces dark with anger. They did not look at Ethan as a prisoner anymore. They looked at him as poison. The reason their camp had been attacked, and every whisper carried Zyra's name, traitor, dishonor, weakness. Ethan sat by the fire, his arm wrapped in bandages, the wound throbbing with pain. But what hurt more was the way Zyra stood apart. Her face cold, her body tense like a blade ready to break. She had fought harder than anyone, protected him at every strike. But now her own people turned their eyes on her. He could feel the storm inside her. Honor pulling one way, feeling pulling another. That night, the elder warrior returned, the one with scars on his armor. He stood before the campfire. His voice like thunder, Zyra, your choices bring danger. Your shame brings death to our people. You protected a human. And now our enemies sent weakness. The camp roared in agreement, their voices sharp. Ethan rose to his feet despite the pain. She saved your lives. She fought harder than any of you. She bled for you. The camp fell into silence at his words, all eyes turning to him. The elder's gaze was filled with hate. You dare speak human. You dare defend her. Before Ethan could answer, Zyra stepped between them. Her blade drawn, her voice was steady, but fire burned in her eyes. Touch him, and you face me. Gasps spread through the camp, warriors stepping back in shock to stand against her. People for a human was the greatest crime, a cut deeper than betrayal. The elder snarled, Then you are lost, Zyra. You are no warrior. You are a disgrace. He lifted his blade, if you wish to protect him. Then fight for him. Fight your own kind. The challenge struck like lightning. The camp formed a circle, warriors shouting, the night filled with the clash of honor and rage. Ethan's chest tightened. "Don't do this, Zaira, you don't." "Have to prove anything?" She glanced back at him, her face unreadable. But her voice soft. "I do." The elder struck first, his blade fast. Heavy with the strength of years, Zaira blocked, sparks flying. The sound echoing through the rocks. They moved like storms colliding, each strike shaking the ground. The camp shouted with every clash, torn between anger and awe. Ethan watched, helpless. His heart racing, he saw her stumble, saw her blood spill, but she kept fighting. Her eyes burning with something more than honor. Every strike she gave carried not only strength, but passion, a fire her people did not understand. The elder roared. "You fight with weakness, you fight with heart, it will kill you." Zara's blade cut across his armor. Her voice fierce. "No, it makes me stronger." The final clash came with a scream of steel. Her blade struck true, tearing across his chest, sending him crashing to the ground. The camp fell silent, their elder broken, their eyes wide with shock. Zaira stood above him, her chest rising with heavy breaths, blood dripping from her arm, but in her face there was no cold mask, only fire, only crimson blush glowing faintly. She lowered her weapon, her voice trembling but strong. "I am Zara, daughter of steel. I fight not only with blade, but with heart. And if that is weakness, then I choose it," the camp whispered, stunned, unsure whether to fear her or follow. Ethan pushed through the crowd, reaching her side. "You're bleeding," he said softly. Zaira looked at him, her eyes soft for the first time. "You are too," she whispered back. And before she could stop herself, she touched his face. Her armored hand gentle instead of brutal. But then, realizing what she had done, she pulled away fast, slapping his shoulder hard. The strike nearly knocked him off balance, but her cheeks burned crimson. The warriors behind them murmured, but none dared step forward. The elder groaned. Beaten, his pride broken, and the circle of fighters slowly dissolved, but the danger was not gone. Ethan knew that even if she had won, her people would never forget this night. They had seen their strongest warrior protect a human. Not for strategy, not for duty, but for something forbidden. Later, when the camp settled, Ethan sat beside her under the stars. He whispered, "You fought for me." Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "I fought for myself," but her eyes betrayed her, glowing softly with something she could not name. Ethan smiled faintly, despite the pain. "Call it what you want, but I know the truth." Her hand twitched, ready to slap again, but this time it only rested against her knee. Shaking, Zaira looked away, hiding the crimson in her cheeks. Her people might call it weakness, but Ethan knew the truth. Tonight, she had fought with both steel and heart, and nothing was stronger than that. The mountains were silent after the duel, but silence did not mean safety. The alien warriors had seen too much. Their strongest fighter had defended a human and declared her heart in front of them all. Zaira sat apart, her armor cracked, her wounds bandaged with rough cloth. Ethan sat near her, weak but alive, his arms still bleeding beneath fresh wraps. The fire burned low, and the camp's whispers grew like shadows. Some called her stronger than ever, others called her traitor. Ethan heard it all, but his eyes stayed on her. She looked calm, but he knew her heart was caught in war deeper than any battlefield. At dawn, the warriors gathered, forming a circle around Zaira, the scarred elder. Though beaten, stood with aid, his voice sharp. "The council will decide your fate. Zaira, you may have won against me, but your shame remains. You chose a human over your people, and that cannot be forgiven." The camp roared in agreement, their voices echoing through the mountains. Ethan stepped forward. Ignoring his pain, she saved you all. She bled for you. She fought harder than any of you, and you call that shame. The elder's gaze burned into him. Silence, human. You are nothing here. But Zaira rose to her feet, her voice cutting through the noise. No, he is not nothing. The camp fell silent, shocked at her words. Achaea stood tall despite her wounds, her eyes fierce. This human showed me what strength truly is. You think honor is silence. That feeling makes us weak. But I have seen another truth. Emotions do not break us. They forge us stronger. The warriors shifted uneasily, some whispering, some glaring. The elder spat on the ground. You speak. Like a human, you are no longer one of us. Zaire lifted her chin. Crimson blush coloring her cheeks, but her voice firm. Then I will no longer hide. I choose my path. I choose him. Gasps spread through the camp like fire, warriors stepping. Back in shock, Ethan's heart pounded. He wanted to speak, but her words left him frozen. She had chosen him. Not as prisoner, not as burden, but as something more. The elder snarled, raising his blade. Then you are no warrior of steel. You are weak, and weakness must die before he could strike. Zaira's blade rose, her voice thundered. Then, strike me and see if weakness bleeds you dry. The camp watched, frozen in fear and awe. The elder's hand trembled, his eyes filled with fury, but he lowered his weapon. He knew what they all knew: Zara was no longer bound by their code. And no warrior could defeat her fire. He turned away in silence, and slowly the other warriors followed, some with respect, some with disgust, one by one. The camp dissolved, leaving Zaira and Ethan alone beneath the rising sun. Ethan sat slowly on the ground, his body weak but his spirit alive. He looked at her with a faint smile. You just stood against your whole world for me. She looked back, her cheeks glowing crimson, her voice soft. Do not mistake this, human. I chose because my heart would not let me do otherwise. He laughed weakly. Sounds a lot like caring. Her eyes narrowed and her hands snapped forward, slapping his shoulder hard enough to sting. But this time, she smiled faintly. The first true smile he had ever seen on her face. They left the camp together, climbing higher into the mountains. The valley stretched behind them, filled with war and ashes, but ahead lay something new. Ethan limped beside her, each step heavy, but her hand steadied him when he stumbled for the first time. She allowed herself the smallest touch, the smallest sign of what she had once called weakness at the ridge. They paused, looking out at the world below. Zara's voice was low, almost trembling. I was born a warrior of steel, taught to kill, taught to silence my heart. But you made me see that even steel can burn. Ethan chuckled softly. And you made me see that even when slapped harder than steel, I still want to stand beside you. Her crimson blush deepened, but she did not turn away this time. Instead, she looked straight at him, her eyes glowing not with cold fire, but with warmth. You are mine now, she said firmly, and nothing will take you from me. Ethan grinned, hot, scary, and possessive. Yeah, that's my type. For a moment, the war, the danger, the whispers of betrayal all faded. All that remained was a human and a warrior, walking side by side into an uncertain future. The world would call them traitors, enemies, fools. But they had chosen steel and heart together. And in that choice, a new story began, one that would shake not only the mountains, but the stars themselves.